was your father?
At my leisure.
Yeah.
Fine.
You ready, Will?
Yeah, fine.
And you've got the tape recorder on and everything else. Fine. So the only lead-in would be that this is the Wabash Carnegie Public Library Oral History Program, and I'm interviewing Mr. Harold W. Sweatt at his office at 730 2nd Avenue, Minneapolis, Minnesota. And some of the information that you'll give us is probably repetition in the books and so forth, but where and when were you born, Mr. Sweatt?
I was born in Minneapolis on November 9th, 1891.
And what was your father's full name?
William Richard Sweatt.
And where was he born in?
He was born in St. John's, Quebec.
And what was your father's background and occupation, briefly?
Well, his father was a banker in Mitchell, Iowa. That's where he just happened to be. And he went in with his father and planted his Fargo. And then the manufacturer came down here and here. The late 80s, I think it was, started the Sweatt Manufacturing Company. And out of that, and he got interested in the Consolidated Temperature Control Company, which became Electric Heat Regulator, that Minneapolis Heat Regulator. And he acquired that, 100% of that, in the early 90s.
Could you describe your father as you remembered him?
My father?
Yes.
Oh, very well.
What did he look like?
Well, I don't know how to describe him that way.
Yeah.
See, pictures of him around here.
Was he a tall man, or?
No, he wasn't very tall. I'd say he was about 5'9". And gray-haired in his later years.
Did he have any brothers or sisters, Mr. Sweatt?
None.
None?
None.
And what was your mother's maiden name?
Jessie Wilson.
And where was she born?
Winona, Minnesota.
And what was her family background?
Well, her father was a lawyer. Originally came from Pennsylvania and was Attorney General of the state out here and practiced law, but other than that, practiced law was like.
Were her parents or your father's parents living when you were small? Do you remember your grandparents?
I remember General Wilson, of course, very well. He didn't die until 1920, and at 80, I think. I don't have much recollection of my father's father. He died when I was a very small boy.
And they call him General Wilson for?
That was, he picked that up as after being Attorney General.
Oh, I see. Do you remember any interesting family stories that your mother told you when you were young relative to something interesting?
Not particularly, no.
Did your mother have other brothers and sisters that you remember?
We have two brothers.
Who lived longest, your mother or your father?
My mother.
Your mother did. We're going on now, what is the earliest event that you remember?
You mean of the company?
No, of yourself, personally. 6 years old, 4 years old, going to a circus?
I remember 6 years old very well when I first went to school.
When you went to school?
I had a dog which followed me to school. The next thing I knew, the school teacher had adopted, or Jerry, the dog, had adopted the school teacher. That was just about it.
And the dog stayed with you then?
Oh no, he stayed with her.
Stayed with her? What was it like growing up in your hometown as a boy?
Well, Minneapolis in those days was a town of about 200,000 people, I would guess. Not too much different from what it is today in life, except for life. Excuse me. Hello? Oh, you want Miss Nelson? I'll have her for you in just a second.
You just had a normal boy's life playing ball and
that's all.
Do you remember any particularly pleasant occasion when you were a little boy?
No, I went to a little summer resort outside of Minneapolis in the summertime. And I went through the public school system here, the grade school, Madison, the Central High School, University of Minnesota.
Were there any teachers that you remember as a young boy being outstanding that had an effect on you?
You're talking about grade school level now?
Yes, sir.
Well, I remember 2 or 3 of them by name. Miss Regan, Miss Matthews, and Miss Trask. They were damn good teachers. Outstanding teachers.
I've noticed that the outstanding teachers stick in the person's mind all their lives. Where did you go to high school then?
Central High School.
Central High School. Anything unusual in high school? Any unusual friends? Or?
Oh, no, just the usual run.
How about your college days at the university?
Well, I felt very happy about my college.
You went to the University of Minnesota?
4 years there.
Did you live on the campus?
Well, part of the time, but most of the home.
Did you join a fraternity?
Yes, I was a beta.
And what did you do for recreation at the university?
I didn't do too much. I mean, never played any sports except tennis and golf.
What did you do in the summers away from the university?
Well, I told you, I lived, university days, let's see.
Yes, sir.
I lived at that time out of a lake about 20 miles out of Minneapolis called Christmas Lake. Spent the summers there.
Your parents would all go out to the lake and you and your brother? And, after you graduated from college, what was your first job?
My first job was with the old Minneapolis Heat Regulator Company.
Right here in Minneapolis.
Yeah. Their offices were over here a couple of blocks by the time.
Do you remember what you did and how much they paid you in those days?
I remember very well what they paid me, $75 a month.
And what
I thought was pretty damn good to get.
Yeah. What year would that have been that you graduated?
I've been 1913.
And what was your particular job when you started at the
I had a little bit of everything. Purchasing agent, handled the advertising. But there were only 36 people in the whole company, aside from a little small office staff.
And your father, of course, was
He was the boss.
He was the boss. I noticed in 1883, Al Butts developed this temperature control. Did you ever meet him?
No.
He was gone, and
he was gone long before my day.
Before you came along. Did your dad know him?
Well, he must have known him.
No, I mean, intimately.
The company back in the 80s.
Right. Let me see. It says that 1913, then you went into the business actively after college days.
Yeah.
And
100%.
100%. And what did you do? What did you do? 1913.
I did about everything. I kept the payroll. I did the purchasing. I say, I did the advertising and some sales.
Did you travel in those days?
What's that?
Did you travel in those days
Yeah, a little.
in company business? Yeah.
We've established a few branch offices in those days too. One in Milwaukee and one in Chicago. Mostly we have distributors.
Anything unusual happen back there on your first job?
No, nothing particular I can remember.
Nothing particular. 1915, you were appointed general manager, and you were in your early 20s in charge of the factory and sales and the branch offices. And how do you felt that you got along? You had been a relatively young man. How did you get along with the employees? And
Oh, I got along fine.
did you? Yeah. How about your competitors in those days? How'd you get along with them?
Well, we didn't have too much except for Honeywell and the Wabash and a company down in Auburn, New York, the Jewel, which Honeywell later bought. And that was about it.
Were you making the decisions, or was your father still making the major decisions back then?
Well, I think I made it, but most of them.
Most of them. And your brother had entered the business also by this time?
No, he didn't come in until
After the war?
after the war. He was in the war.
Yeah.
And came to the company after 1919, I think, when he got out of the service.
What were some of the problems, as you remember, in the temperature regulating business back in those early days, 1915 to 1920?
We didn't have too many. I mean, the Honeywell Minneapolis time consisted of a one-day thermostat, a plain thermostat, a one-day clock thermostat, and an 8-day clock thermostat, and a spring motor, which to actuate the dampers. And it was might have been 15, but I think it was 14. We brought out the first electric motor actuator.
Versus the spring wand. Up to that time, they had been.
That, by the way, was the first time I met Paul Shivers.
Oh yes, yeah.
He was working for General Electric in Fort Wayne in those days. He hadn't come with Mark.
Did you induce him to go with Mark, or?
Oh no, I didn't know anything about it naturally until
1919, after World War I, your brother did come into the business, and what was your working
he
relationship?
took over sales
He took sales.
and advertising and so on.
Your working relationship then was actually we're going down separate paths, and very good. Oh, fine. How about we're going now into some of the early problems that you might want to comment on, the seasonal sales and the problems you were having with clocks back in those early days.
We didn't have too many problems with clocks. They didn't run too well. It's hard to keep time, accurate time with those cheap clocks. You know, they were really the equivalent of a one-day alarm clock and an 8-day alarm clock.
Well, didn't you decide then to go out and build your own clock at that time?
No, that was about 1920.
That's what you decided to do.
The history of that was we first bought a Chelsea clock. You probably remember the name Chelsea. It was a fine name in the clock business. And that was an 8-day, 8-joule, 7-joule movement. And we continued the two lines, the cheaper clock and that line. And then when the demand for the better clock, particularly from our customers in the oil burning field, Chelsea was too small to supply them. And that's when I decided to go out and make our own clocks, which we did. As I remember it, I think 23 or 24 was the first year. That was one of the early clocks.
In those early days, were there any problems on copyrights and patents and that you remember that were unusual?
No, I don't remember any patent troubles back in
that early.
1907 or so, the first days of the clock thermostat. The Jewel Company sued us, and this was finally settled out of court, as I remember it, because we had a video prior art.
Were there any government regulations back in those days, Mr. Sweatt? As we get into today,
nothing like that.
Nothing like that. Yeah. Do you remember, was there any additional company stock being offered for sale?
No, it was a closed corporation. Some of the employees of Minneapolis had stock that my father had sold to them. Yeah. I think there was an arrangement if they left the company to buy back the stock on some sort of a formula, but I've forgotten for sure about that. None was ever bought back that I know of.
How about the relationships with the banks, and were there any financial problems with the banks?
No. Our credit was always first class.
Yeah. Did the financial institutions think that the company would be successful back in those days? Bankers take a rather callous eye, to someone that's...
Well, I don't think that we were always good for our obligations. We weren't peddling stock or anything of that kind. You see, no investment banking.
And you had a good cash flow and everything, and...
Yeah.
Was anyone from the family serving on any of the banks at that time? Your father, your brother, anyone on the boards, or?
I think my father was a board of the Lake Street Bank, National Bank, which was later consolidated with the Northwestern National Bank. And he served on that board for a very short time. Then I went on. I remember very well, the first bank meeting I went to was, they called me up at 5 o'clock in the morning to get down to the bank, because the banks were all closing that day, and we had to get an order from Floyd Olson, who was then governor, to allow us to close. Federal said we had to close. The state's law said you couldn't close. We finally found Floyd on a train coming back from Washington. Got that straightened out. But it was quite an introduction to the banking system.
Sure, wasn't it? What year would that have been, Mr. Sweatt?
Well,
that was the bank holidays of the 30s?
Now, let's see, when...
33 was pretty heavy that year.
I think it was 33.
Yeah, might have been, yeah.
I think it was March of 33, just after.
That's the bank holiday.
Roosevelt came in as president.
Getting a little ahead of ourselves, but back in the 20s now, as you would have been a young man in the company in the early 20s, what was the employee-employer relationship at that time? How were you getting along with the employees and so on?
We had no trouble.
No union at that time, nothing. And how did you rate competitively in the Minneapolis labor market then, wage-wise?
Well, we always paid going wages or a little better.
Yeah.
They weren't very high, though, in those days.
Yes,
enough.
I remember back in the teens when I first got the payroll, the going rate for a man on the assembly bench was 22.5 cents an hour, and a machinist got 27.5 cents an hour.
Of course, it was all theirs, or no deductions in those days.
We were a very advanced company. We worked 12 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. And then we switched to 10.5 hours a day and 5 hours on Saturday, and had Saturday afternoon off. That was quite an
Well, but that was considered very progressive at the time.
very progressive.
Now we're going to get into the merger here. And what was the background, as you remember, to decide to merge with the Honeywell Heating Specialty Company in Wabash? And as you remember it, your own personal view.
Well, my father and Mr. Honeywell meet occasionally. I talked mostly with Bill Huff, who was my vintage, and sort of a top man in Honeywell Wabash operations. And Minnesota was playing Notre Dame. That was the days when we had Bronco Nagurski up there. And Newt Brockney was still at South Bend.
Right.
So we all went down to the game. And Bill Huff, I think, was in Minneapolis at that time. I'm quite sure of it. No, he wasn't either. But I went down to the game and met Mark Honeywell and Olive in the hotel there right after the game. Then we went down, the Huffs were up there, spent the weekend at Wabasee.
At his lake house?
At his lake house in Wabasee. And I remember Mark Honeywell was standing on the stairs looking over the lobby where he could see me if I came in. I saw him, pointed him out to marry my wife. She said, "He looks almost human, doesn't he?"
That's great. That's great.
Was that the only time you were ever at the house in Wabasee?
I don't remember. I think I was probably there often again, but most of my visits were right in Wabash. And of course, actually, I saw probably more of Mark and Noble in Florida than I did up here.
During this period that we're talking about now, that you had a management policy, you stated a management policy that you wouldn't get into the heating equipment business. You were just going to stick to making controls.
Right.
Was there a reason for that?
Yes, because the manufacturers of furnaces, later on of refrigerators, all that stuff were our customers. We didn't want to get in the position of competing with them.
Was there any foreign competition back there in the early 20s?
Foreign?
Yes, sir. Foreign?
No.
Nothing. How about your own overseas markets back in the 20s then?
We didn't have any to mount it.
Nothing going at that time.
It was in the early 30s that we started to develop our foreign business.
When the stock market crashed in 1929, what was your reaction and what happened?
Well, it was pretty tough.
Yeah.
But I had no outstanding marginal commitments of any kind. It was just a question of sitting and riding through it. The business was awful slack, too. You remember, if you look at your timetable there, just before that, no, it was after that, we bought Trimestat up in Elkhart.
Oh, yes. Then that was later sold, I believe.
But as I remember the figures, common stock in the Minneapolis-Honeywell came out at $33 a share. It went up to about 129, and then it crashed, and before it hit the bottom of that, it was down to $10 or $11 a share.
That was probably typical of most companies at that time. It was not.
Well, it wasn't much different than anybody else, you know. U.S. Steel went from 280 to 19.
General Electric was another big one that was a big loser.
Everybody did.
How did the company survive the Depression?
Well, we had no troubles because we were well financed. I mean, we had ample capital. So we had, as a company, we had no troubles.
Didn't you go into making some measuring devices or something for one of the flour mills? And did I read that in
Yeah,
your
that
book?
little spout for Pillsbury.
Didn't you manufacture some little device for Pillsbury or something to keep the factory going?
Oh, that was little powers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, yeah, right.
I presume this would have been typical of the Depression type activities,
Yeah,
or
well,
anything to keep going.
Yes, and then we manufactured about that time too, I'd say acetylene torches for Elmer Smith Company, Smith Welding Company.
What happened to the employees during the Depression? Were you able to hang on to the nucleus?
Well, I can't remember, but we must have gone down very substantially.
Now I'm going to ask you your personal reaction to the Democrats' economic theories that were coming on then in the early 30s. You were an outstanding businessman. And
I didn't like them at all, of course. I still don't.
Right.
Did the SEC have any corporate effect on the management at this time? Nothing. Did you support or involve the company in the NRA during that period? You were almost
As
forced
little
to.
as I could
Yeah,
help.
I think you were forced to almost at the third.
I was something chairman of something or other, some group.
Were the unions getting organized at the plants at that
What's
time?
that?
Were the unions getting organized in the early 30s then? Still not.
No, that didn't happen until the Second World War came along, just before that.
During this period then, when you're in a depression period, how was the Wabash operation and Mark Honeywell and so forth riding along?
They were riding just about the same pace we did.
Now, was he still taking an active part in the business in the 30s?
Well, it depends on what you mean by active. He didn't have any direct responsibilities, but he was very actively interested in everything, except this sort of thing I told you he was doing in engineering works, which he loved.
But he had no direct involvement in his...
Not in the day-to-day operations.
You know, this is a question, and one of the things that we have often felt too, that probably even at the time of the merger, that you were probably more of an influence in operating the company, even though Mark was president for that period of 5 or 6 years after the merger.
Well, my father was chairman of the board. Mark was president. I was vice president, general manager. So the actual operations all fell on me.
That's what we thought. Yeah, we've always felt that the Mark's real interest, as you say, was more in engineering new products and experimentation than the building.
In 34, I was made president. And that was the year that Mark became either 60 or 65. I've forgotten which.
It'd be 60.
60, because he would have been 100 in 1974.
Right. Next year would be.
He would have been 60.
Yeah.
He'd been 60 then.
Yes,
Yep,
he would
right.
have been 60. You were relatively young to assume the presidency.
Well,
You was in about
40. I was 41.
Yeah.
Did the company have any indication, or did you have any indication that World War II was coming on, as you remember?
Oh, yes, I felt it very definitely and very strongly. I remember I was on a North Cape cruise, and I left my family in Sweden and flew down to spend a week in London, visiting the bankers and one thing another over there in our little office. We'd established an office by that time with Jim Fraser in command. And I used to come back to the hotel every night and find myself asleep because I was completely convinced that war was coming on. And I was never so delighted when I got halfway across the Atlantic, because this was August. And if I was right, it was coming on in September. So I got home, and the first thing I did was to get them to detach a chap for me, Ralph Getzenberger, to contact the Defense Department activities, and we scrambled right into war work then. We had to learn how to do it first. I took a little doing for the first 6 months or so.
We've had quite a record that I'm sure Minneapolis operations are just as proud as Wabash. The E awards that we won, I think Honeywell's record was outstanding for their contribution during the war years.
Now, you got the Army E down there. We were the second or third company in the country to get the Army and Navy E up here in Minneapolis. And I'll never forget that night. We had a big presentation award down in the armory here with all the employees invited, their wives. And before that, they'd come up with me, the public relations people, with a schedule for the half hour, because we were going to be on radio. And it's the first time anybody's been on radio with one of these things, on a national hookup. And everything was scheduled, 40 seconds for the invocation, so on, right down to the minute. And the last speaker was Harold Stassen, who was then governor of the state, but itching to be something else. Well, they had a little Catholic priest from a chaplain over at Fort Snelling here to deliver the invitation. And he'd written the speech out, and I'd seen it. It didn't take over 40 seconds. But he forgot all about that. And he'd gone blessed Honeywell for 25 minutes. And Don Armstrong, who was making the presentation, General Armstrong, and see, I was standing alongside of both of us. I finally turned to him and I said, General, we can't stop the officer of the Lord from talking.
Yeah.
Well, Harold Stassen never forgave me for that.
Yeah.
Because by the time he got down to him, we'd been off the air for 20 minutes.
He was talking to local people again.
Yeah.
Were they, as you remember, was the company having any financial problems then back in the late 30s before the war came on?
We never had any financial problems.
Basic patent rights or anything of that problem then?
No, we didn't have any patent troubles in those days, as I recall.
What was your personal part in the World War II production?
Well, I was probably main contact between the company and our operations there and the Washington people, Bureau of Ordnance, and so on. I'll never forget. I was called up from Florida for a meeting by Bill Knutz, General Knutz, who was then head of the War Production Board. And I got off the train in Washington about 7 o'clock in the morning. My boys met me. Said, we've got an appointment right now before your meeting starts over in the Ordnance Department. I said, fine. Well, the Ordnance Department in those days was what was then called the Social Security Building. And we used to go around behind the elevators, through all the rooms of blueprints, and so on, all marked confidential or secret. Nobody stopped me. Down to the offices of this artillery division. Rooney Taylor was head of it, General Taylor. I got there, and there wasn't a damn soul around the place except his secretary. And I said, "Where is everybody?" Well, she said, "Don't you smell something?" I sniffed a few times, and I said, "Yes." And all I smell is mothballs. Well, she said, "All the young men are in their uniforms. They got out of mothballs, and they smell to high heaven. The older ones are all the tailors getting their uniforms put out."
Getting ready to go. Were there any outstanding problems that you had during World War II at a management level or anything?
No, I wouldn't say so.
You then, after the war, moved on to chairman of the board. How old would you have been in relatively
I
early?
think that was the 50s.
Relatively early age?
You would have been 61.
I retired in 55, I think. Yeah, I've been out of Honeywell now for 17 years.
Right. Did you see Mark later then, later years, in your later years, socially?
Oh, yes. I remember particularly one trip. This was the first time I noticed something was changing with it. We have this theory of sclerosis. Well, I met them in Paris, in London. And then we went up to our plants in Scotland. He had Jean with him, and my Mary was with me. Then we took a car and drove up the Highlands of Scotland. And I began to realize that he just didn't remember what he was doing from one minute to the next. But we had no untoward incident, but it just got steadily worse after that.
I think I understood from Jean that you were at their wedding when they were married in 42.
Oh,
yes. You and Mary were there. In fact, I talked to Jean on the phone. She called me the other day, and she wanted me to pass on her regards, and said that she'd gotten a letter from her. All right, fine.
She's been down.
Oh, yeah. Wonderful woman. She's been a little sick lately. Hadn't been out of the house for 2 or 3 weeks, but she's feeling much better now.
That's good.
But
she's a splendid woman.
She sure is. Wonderful woman.
Speaking of Mr. Honeywell, I got a couple other questions here. Were you really operating the company when he was title of president? You were really...
I was general manager. I was operating it.
And he was given the title as consideration for the merger, would you say?
Yeah, well, he never did act as the head executive.
I would assume there was
Those days, the threesome pretty well ran the company. Bill Huff, and my brother C.B. We acted as threesome. We talked almost everything over, and no troubles.
What was and I'll refer to it as the Minneapolis attitude toward the Wabash plant over the years, would you think?
Well, I used to have a hell of a time, particularly in later years, trying to keep that plant going. They always want to pull something out of it and never put something in.
Why did you think that? Why was that attitude, I wonder?
Well, I think part of it was the location, the people who were just hard to get to. If they had it under the thumb out in Arlington, it was easy. Incidentally, that was a hell of a place to get to. I had to leave here in the afternoon, then get a night train out of Sleeper to Fort Wayne, and then come up by trolley. Well, that to Wabash. Well, that was too damn much. So finally, we ended up by buying that Model A Ford, keeping in the garage in Warsaw. Go back and forth and that made it much easier.
Not too much easier now. By plane, we go to Fort Wayne, to Chicago, to Minneapolis, and a little faster. Would you say that was probably the reason that the Wabash plant wasn't considered for expansion over the years?
Well, yes, the other thing was that everybody said that your labor problems, your labor job problem was limited number of people that you could get.
Even though the labor rate was lower. In fact, I think Ed Spencer visited the plant in February, and Ed commented to me at the time, he said that we probably have the lowest labor rate in the corporation outside of Microswitch at Freeport.
Of course, I haven't any idea what the rates are down there.
I'm going to ask you about your family. We haven't talked about you personally. And how did you meet your wife?
Oh, we don't each other since we were that high.
And just sort of grew into marriage?
Yeah.
Did you have children?
Well, I had 2 children. A boy who graduated from Stanford in '39. And then he and 2 other boys started out on a trip around South America. And he got some kind of an encephalitis bug down in Chile. Got as far as BA and died there. My daughter has given me 6 grandchildren.
And she's living here?
Oh, yes, she's living here. Children are pretty well scattered now.
What does her husband do?
Hmm?
What does her husband do?
Well, just the moment he's not doing much of anything. He's been interested in an international time-sharing company, which he was chairman of the board of. But I think it tied him down too much, and he wanted to get out of the responsibilities of that and get another man in to run it. So at the moment, he's always had his hands more than full with projects.
Your grandchildren give you a lot of pleasure, I would say.
Very much so.
And their ages run?
Well, they run from 28 to 12.
28 to 12. I think that's great. I know my own children give my in-laws a lot of pleasure. Mrs. Sweatt, is she still living, Mrs. Sweatt?
No. Yeah. She died 8 years ago.
8 years ago. Getting back to Mark Honeywell again, do you ever remember him in a particularly humorous situation?
Well, I always thought Mark had quite a keen sense of humor, but I can't remember any particular incident.
What would you think that Mr. Honeywell's contribution was to the industry? Or what his outstanding contribution to the industry?
Well, the old Honeywell line, original Honeywell line, was a damn good line of heat regulators.
And you would assess that as his contribution, his outstanding contribution?
Well, yes, but you know the things he's done in Wabash. He's always doing something down there.
Do you think his contributions to the industry and the civic life, do you think they've really been recognized?
Well, I wouldn't be the one to answer that question. He wasn't too well known in the industry, at least after my day. He never was out contacting his customers to any great extent or anything of that kind. So I don't think too many people knew him in the industry.
Do you remember any particular reason why you decided to stay with the name Honeywell?
Yes, that's simple. The reason we got the original name, Minneapolis-Honeywell Regulator Company, was we were Minneapolis Heat, and we had some stone engraving on the building up there. It was simple to take the heat out of that. for Honeywell.
I never realized that. Never, all these years, I never knew. Good.
And then all my people up here, of course, still talked about Minneapolis and MH, and very rarely about Honeywell. And what Honeywell took and became generic and finally was still back in my day. I said to hell with it. It's a long, hard name to write. Everybody calls us Honeywell anyhow. Let's, at least in our advertising, just stick to the Honeywell part, downgrade the Minneapolis-Honeywell logotype. Then eventually they changed it to Honeywell Incorporated. I thought that was a little mistake. I would have rather seen. I was forced to done. I'd rather have seen us keep the name Controls in it.
Honeywell Controls Incorporated or something of that nature.
Found that one of our reasons for it, we were branching out in all directions. Why tie yourself down to some?
That seems to be the trend today in corporate usage of a name to get away from a description that would tie you down to one particular industry.
Never considered calling it Sweatt or something like that.
No.
Not the. It could lead to all interesting kinds of problems, couldn't it? Looking back on your own personal life, would you still have followed the same career? Really? Would you still have followed the same career? Starting it? Would you?
Honeywell was my life.
Yeah. And you have no regrets in following this career at all? I read the book, The Restless Spirit, and I enjoyed it very much in the photographs. How did you happen to come writing the book?
All I wrote was a little short
Introduction?
speech. That came out of a speech that I made originally to some of the micro crowd who were up here visiting at the dinner. But I had written it to a month or so before, and I tried it out on my board of directors, and they didn't think much of it. But then I used it that night at this dinner, and that's 20-odd years ago, and it's still lasting.
Very good.
And I meant it very sincerely that I don't like anybody that's main object in life is keep everything in neat and orderly. I'd rather take a few chances once in a while, get in trouble, get out of it, rather than do nothing.
I assume that you worked rather closely with the author on the book, and
Bill Nessel. Yeah.
It was pretty well received, the book.
What?
Was the book well received? And
I don't know what book you're talking about.
The Restless Spirit, the little white.
Oh, Bill Nessel?
Yeah.
I guess so. I don't know.
Were you active all these years in civic affairs here in Minneapolis and in Minnesota?
I was never very active. I tried to do my duty on civic affairs like the community chest and so on, but I was too damn busy trying to run the company, traveling all the time. And I've maintained that I built something from nothing up to 15, 18, 20,000 people employed in Minneapolis, but that was quite a contribution right there.
I would say so. Were you ever active in politics?
Never.
How about the church?
Oh, I was senior warden of my Episcopal church, both here in Minneapolis and down in Florida, but I'm no great churchman.
Have you enjoyed good health all your life?
No.
No major illnesses or operations?
I've never had any troubles of serious. I've got high blood pressure, which I control. Medication to help me trouble. I got emphysema.
Did you smoke in your younger days? Did you smoke in your younger days?
I was a chimney.
Were you? Well, that goes back to your college days, probably. So you've enjoyed relatively good health.
Very good health.
What do you do in your leisure time now?
I don't do much of anything.
Yeah. Come down to the office every day?
I come down here every day for a couple of...
It goes back to your college days, probably. So you've enjoyed relatively good health then?
Very good health.
What do you do in your leisure time now?
I don't do much of anything.
Yeah. Come down to the office every day?
I come down here every day for a couple of hours. Got to go over to the club across the street. Go upstairs to the bar and have a couple of drinks at our table. 8 or 10 old timers. And play a little bridge in the afternoon occasionally. That's about all.
Enjoy television in the evening, probably?
Television bores me. Aside from the news, I don't watch much television.
You still read quite a bit?
Quite a bit.
Do you have any reflections on life in general now that you're 80 past? And
No, I don't think so.
Well,
there's one thing that bothers me in this modern generation is they're seeming uninterested in business. I mean, you take most of these graduates, as I get the picture, even from these business schools, they have a rather low opinion of business and profits. But I try to tell them if you didn't have business and profits, you wouldn't have anything else for you to fuss around with.
Right. Very good point. Well said.
What do you think has given you the most satisfaction in your life?
Oh, just to see what's happened to Honeywell. My life's at Honeywell.
And your biggest disappointment, would you say?
I don't know of any major disappointment, except the loss of my son.
Would you have a little gem of wisdom or something for someone who would be listening to this maybe 50 years from now?
I don't think so.
Wait a second, I'm going to turn the tape over.
Okay.
Yeah. Not very often. I hate crowds.
Yeah.
Struggling to get through the gates in and out. That's the way I don't travel much anymore. I hate airports.
Yeah. They're crowded.
Yeah, I mean, you're always milling around, waiting, baggage is late, something's wrong.
Would you have any advice for a young person who's starting out in a management career at Honeywell, or any place really?
Well, I just think the main thing for a youngster starting out in Honeywell or any other corporation is you've got to start low down, and you're going to be more or less bored with what you're doing most of the time, with moments of high exhilaration. But that's been the way all around the world for years. Nobody seems to realize it anymore.
I noticed some Honeywell minutes there. Is there anything of significance that you had those out for today?
I had them out for you.
Okay. What we want to do, I had a few questions that maybe I might ask. One of the things that I've always been impressed by is how you've kept so physically fit. I know you golfed. I think Gene Honeywell said that you played golf. Have you ever done
a lot of golf and a lot of tennis, but I've done enough golf for the last 2 or 3 years.
You made a nice post-war trip to Germany was that in behalf of the government or was that your own?
Oh, I've been to Germany a number of times. I was over there 2 or 3 times for the Department of State, just on a consulting basis. Be over there for 6 weeks or 2 months, something like that.
Did you really think at that time the German economy would come back as strong as it did?
Well, maybe not as strong, but I was completely convinced it was coming back and coming back fast.
Yeah.
And I remember one time somebody sent me, I guess it was Harold Stassen, who was in charge of aid. Got a hold of me just before I went over there. Said, I want you to see these union leaders in Germany as well as the businessmen and convince them to raise their wages and get the economy on an upper level. Well, after I'd been over there and did a little of this, I cabled back and I said, this is a waste of time. There's no unemployed in Germany. They're importing from all over Europe, and the wages will take care of themselves under those conditions, which of course is just what happened.
Is your brother still, I assume he has an office here.
Right next door.
Is he in good health?
Yes, he's fine.
Two of you see each other quite frequently then.
I remember another funny instance over in Germany. First time I went over, this must have been, this was about 54, I should think. 53. I went up from Bonn, where I was stationed, up to Frankfurt, where we were supposed to have our office. And I got up there and found the office address. Tried to open the door, it was locked. And after pounding around while bells, some woman came down, opened the door, and let me in. I went upstairs, and our man, who was really a serviceman more than, was just having a conniption fit because his accountant had stolen $25 from him. And was spending all his time on that. And I said, well, why the hell don't you get an organization to go out and sell something? Well, I got back here. I said, I got to change this thing. I couldn't do it while I was over there. But I want something, man. We'll go over and we'll move Bill or whatever his name is up to Sweatt on a service job, which you'll be happier at. I think he's still up there. And we'll just turn this thing over upside down. It'll probably cost us a lot of money for a couple of years, but we'll at least get ourselves known in Germany. Which we did. We've been very successful in Germany. Clancy, who's Spangle, who's now in charge of all EVP stuff. Boston. After a few years getting this thing started, it happened just what I said it would. This boy that we gave me hired people right and left, but he didn't know how to manage them. So we finally sent Clancy over. And he was in Germany about 5 years. Then we sent him to England in charge of the English operations about 5 years. And then we brought him home. Sent him up to Boston. This thing, he's a damn good manager.
Were you still active when the unions came on strong then, Mr. Sweatt?
Oh, yes.
But
I always had one motto that I have always followed. I would never actively get mixed up in any union negotiations because I always had the theory that the minute I did, the fellow who was actually negotiating couldn't get any place until they finally come up to me, and I didn't want to break his authority. So I never had any active. I mean, my management was behind, if any, was behind the scenes.
I think that's still the philosophy today. I know this is the philosophy we've been instructed in our own operations, and I think that's pretty well true. And that also gives the negotiator a chance of a higher level that he could still go to and resort to.
Yeah, you just ruined your man
Yes, if you don't give him that authority. Yeah.
One trip of Pan Am did that. He had some trouble with some union, I forgot what it was. And electricians, I guess. And he went down to their office and captained their office. This union head would make him sit there for 4 hours. Well, hell, Pan Am never had a night Chinaman's shaft after that. They always had to come up one before anything gets done.
you winter in Florida still?
Oh, yes.
Enjoy it?
I'm going down the 20th next month, and I stay until about the 1st of June.
very pleasant.
I keep an office down there.
Yeah.
I'm a Floridian. Been a Floridian by for 40 years as a citizen for it.
We just chew the fat here on some social commentary. How about Watergate and some of these things? You've been through many Teapot Dome and many other things. And what's
Well,
your...
Watergate gets my goat because I can't see how anybody, whoever conceived and helped it, could be so damn stupid. They didn't need to do that.
What do you think in the long range?
But the thing that bothers me more than that is all of this financial juggling that was going on by the committee to re-elect the president.
Now, putting cash in different
I
banks.
think anybody ought to know that you can't, the corporation can't contribute to a political campaign.
You were speaking of Stassen just a couple minutes ago, and I would assume that your position as the leader of industry and his political position. I see where he's a very successful international lawyer now.
In Philadelphia.
Yeah. Have you seen him lately at all?
I haven't seen her for several years. We always exchange Christmas cards. That's about all now.
And that he is up in the high six-figure income, doing very well at it.
He must be.
Yeah. They read an article, I think, in Time
He was
magazine.
in his 30s when he was governor here. A young 30s, I guess, but that was 40 years ago, almost. That puts him up in the high 60s, I should
Yeah,
think.
he is. And doing very well. Better than he ever did on his political career.
Well, he got imbued with the idea that he must be president of the United States, and he did some of the damnedest fool things that made it impossible for him to get any place.
Is Mr. Huff, now, is he still living? Well, I'm not sure.
No, he died about 2 years or 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago.
Did he have a family then?
Oh, yes.
Any of them with Honeywell?
No. Oh, yes, John, his son does. John Huff.
I think he's with Aero Division, I think. I'm not.
No, he's with the plastics
Plastic.
division. I don't know just what it is.
Anyone with the Sweatt name active?
Ceramics.
Yeah, that's it. Right.
Anyone with the Sweatt name still active in this business? None of your grandchildren?
Oh, yes, Harry Sweatt is. One of CB's sons. He's down in Wellesley and Waltham.
Yeah, of course.
Computer business.
Very good.
Well, I had some things, one of the things that I thought, one of the reasons I'm so interested, particularly talking to you, because I have sensed the same thing about Mark Honeywell's life, that I think Mark's contribution to mankind, he was an entrepreneur, he had some early creative ideas, but I've been more impressed with you by your management ability, that you, to me, were the real manager. You were the person that made Honeywell as a company, and that's one of the reasons I've been so personally...
I was in on everything, 27 at least.
And that's one reason I've personally been so excited about getting up. I'm young too. In fact, I'm the same age you were at the time of the merger. But I want to let you know that the Wabash plant is doing very well. We've had a...
Who's running it now?
I'm the manager of the
You're
plant.
the manager.
Yes, right.
Good.
And we've had a substantial profit this past year, and we've added 100 new employees, and we're working
How
3
many
shifts.
got there now?
We have about 350 people. We were down to a low point of 179 a few years ago.
Well, that's too low.
Yes, it is. And the community can support actually probably a little higher level, and we're planning to just about double the size of the operation over the next 2 years. Our plans on it, and we're concentrating.
I'm awfully sorry to see them take the damper business out of there. And I never could see any excuse for that.
No. I wasn't personally that involved at the time in the operation of the plant. But, very good.
Are there any of the old timers that I used to...
Well, Jim Evinghouse just recently retired. You may, Paul Shivers daughter married Jim. Do you recall Jim Ebbinghaus? Jim Ebbinghaus.
Oh, yes, sure.
Yeah. And Jim just recently retired. And this Mickey McDaniels that was a purchasing agent for years.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, and George has done the oral history on both of these people, and they've talked to him, and of course, then quite a few of the people out in the factory area. But
well, you had a damn good man when we back in your merger days in Penrose. He was damn good. We brought him up here.
Yes, yes. And then Shivers later came back up here, didn't he?
Oh, he was here. Must have been here 15 years.
Yeah, that's why I thought he came up probably around the war years. If I recall.
He's retired. He's in Wabash, isn't he? Or is he up here?
No, he's up here.
Is he here?
Yeah, what I've heard, he's up here. And that's very good. But the factory's doing quite well. We're very pleased, and things have turned out.
To know it.
You know, and in fact, I had that same attitude. Ed Spencer visited the plant and talked to me last February. That time he talked, sometime about the tradition of Wabash having a plant here, and I told him, I said, I'm too proud personally to want to keep the plant in Wabash unless we're producing our contribution as it should be to the company, and that's the way I think the people feel too. We want to make our. That's right. We want to make our contribution. We don't want to be there just because we're sentimental. That's right, and I think it's been going this way, and the people are responding quite well.
Well, what's your main product?
Pretty much sheet metal manufacturing, and I've taken a few risks in the past year, and we've gone on the outside, and we're doing a lot of subcontract, more or less a job shop type work, and we're getting into some large contracts. We do work with a number of large companies. General Electric, we do a lot of work with General Electric in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Have you still got sheet metal capacity down there?
Yes. Yes, this is probably our basic manufacturing. We still have the humidistat line. That's still there.
Oh, I never could figure out why we couldn't get Wabash and Boston crowd together on some of this frame stuff.
We're doing this now, Harold. Yes.
You got it done?
Yes. And we
I used to try to sell whoever was running at Mosworth, I guess, in those days.
Right.
I said, you've got, that's the damnedest hardest selling job in the world.
Yes. To sell your
own people.
That's right.
Right.
Much easier to go and tell somebody else.
Very true.
One of the things we have done to do it, Harold, we have taken a philosophy that to treat the people in the company as a customer, not somebody that should be taken for granted. So we make sales calls on these people, and if we take them to lunch, if we would take a customer lunch, we take them to lunch, and it's been rather successful by doing so.
Very good. I'd like to get down there sometime.
Oh, we'd love to have you, really would, and I know Gene Honeywell would be very pleased to have you there.
I think last time I was there, it was at Mark's funeral.
That would have been around '64, I believe. Yeah.
Will possibly Mr. Sweatt would like to see some of those etchings. I noticed
we brought this along for you. One of our employees did this some time ago, and some of those are scenes around Wabash, and you can look that over at your leisure.
The old county courthouse.
That's right. That's right. So we brought this along for you. There's some etchings in there that one of our employees did several years ago, and
that.
Oh, that's the police house, the police building and the city hall building on Wabash Street.
I think that's
the Honeywell Center building, of course.
1886 architecture, I think, is the reason it's a particular style.
Yeah.
How's the community center doing?
It's quite well. And in fact, they're getting ready to build a new building now. And there's the Christian church there. I get that picture. And there's the library building there.
Remember that?
And this is the post office, And that's, that used to be the old hospital. Now that's the women's clubhouse now. That building is. And then this is Mrs. Honeywell's home there. Picture of her home.
That's her new home.
Yes, right.
The old house, whatever became of that old Honeywell house?
They're both still standing.
It's still
Yes,
standing?
sir. It's both the one that they lived in on the English half timber and the other.
Did you ever know the background of the Wabash Country Club?
Not that much. I'm a vice president of the country club today.
Well, Mark Honeywell had a couple of chows, and he bought that property originally for the dogs to run in. And then, like everything he did, began to improve the whole property. And it became gardens and one thing and another. Eventually grew into the country club. But it started out as a run for the dogs.
Never realized. Okay. Well, I guess the building that the clubhouse is in, I think at one time was his photography studio.
Yeah, well then, I was going to say that one time, then he got interested in moving pictures.
Right.
And then he built that building there for his moving picture stuff.
Do you ever remember seeing some of his movies that he made?
I can't remember ever seeing a movie.
He used to have someone come down from Chicago, someone that was his cameraman, and he'd have pictures of the gardens and so forth made. He was great on that photography hobby of his.
You never knew the first Mrs. Honeywell?
No, I'm sorry I didn't, because when I was in Wabash, when I first came to Wabash, the original family home where she was born and raised was still standing. But I understand that she was a very pleasant, gracious woman.
Well, Mr. Honeywell certainly did video for Wabash.
Yes, he did.
He did.
Yes.
I understand he had his troubles with it. Some people liked what he was doing and some didn't.
I often wondered, as I asked you before, if they've recognized his civic contributions.
Well, I can see it. That Community Center is.
Right. I think a good example, one of the stories that we heard during the oral histories, that, and I think it'd be a good illustration of Mark, one time on the country club board, they were debating about what type of chairs they were going to use in the country club in the house there, and they were arguing back and forth on what kind of chair to use, and finally Mark spoke up and he said, I'll tell you what, I'll just buy the chairs and we'll use this one. And I think that was a good illustration. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But they couldn't make up their mind. They couldn't decide what to do. And he had one that he liked.
You want to take those books?
Yeah, I noticed some points here have been identified in these books. Maybe there are some things we might ask questions on.
Put slips of paper in there on some of the
Good.
books. The old factory's torn down, isn't it, down by the canal?
Yes. In fact, of course, Mrs. Honeywell, her previous marriage to the Nixons, and the Nixons had the newspaper there, and the plane dealer building is now on the property of the old Honeywell plant.
Oh, is it? That's
Friday. Yes, and they've done a good job. They have the old mill wheel that used to be Mark's father.
The old factory's torn down, isn't it, down by the canal?
Yes. In fact, of course, Mrs. Honeywell, her previous marriage to the Nixons, and the Nixons had the newspaper there, and the plane dealer building is now on the property of the old Honeywell plant.
Oh, is it? That's
Friday. Yes, and they've done a good job. They have the old mill wheel that used to be Mark's father's part of the mill. That is in front of the newspaper office there, but it's they've done it. It's all in very good taste. It's a very pretty building. And
whatever became of the old mill wheel?
It's still there in front of the newspaper building there.
That's right. It's right there where
Nixon would run the paper and all that.
Joe Nixon.
Joe, isn't it?
Right.
And who's the name of the other one?
Don was the one
Don is the one over
John Edward Crew. Right. That was Mrs. Honeywell's son, and of course Joe would be her son by marriage.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I see. Now, this particular book says of the,
I don't know what they are.
the merger.
These are minute books of the directors' meeting.
Right.
Here's an interesting thing. I just hit this one. Here's the list, October 15th and 40, of the war work we had up to that date. You see, all of this is done in Wabash.
Yes.
And this M7 telescope. Oh, by the way, this is an interesting story you might like to have. Remember, you probably know, we made all the periscopes.
Yes.
And there was a sight inside of one of the periscopes for sighting the guns on. Yeah, M4, I think it was called. Well, I was down in New York one time. I went down for a meeting of the Army Ordnance Board. We met in the Stock Exchange Director's Room. And had lunch there, and we went through the meetings. I didn't think we accomplished very much. And about 2 o'clock, I said, I'm going back to the hotel and catch a train to Minneapolis. Oh, no, you're not. General, what's his name? I can't remember his name. Said, my boys are all sitting up in your hotel room, waiting for you to get back there, and you get up there as fast as you can. So I went up there, and Rooney Taylor and Gordon Welch, and all of them were there. They produced this long telescopic sight, about that long. And they said, you've got to make 3,000 of these, or whatever the quantity was. And we will pick them up, send a plane in to pick them up. And all we can tell you about it is that they'll be flown to the East Coast and put on ship. And when they get off the ship, they'll be shooting. Well, I said, I can't make a telescope like that. I don't know where I get the optics. And do it in 3 weeks. Well, that's what you got to do. Well, I said, all right. I went up there and looked this thing over. And I still didn't think we could do it. But I caught the Century to Chicago, and I wired your boys in Wabash. I think Stan Nichols was there in those days. And Fred Dennison, no, he was gone. A couple of people from Minneapolis, and a couple more from Wabash. We held this meeting, and Wabash announced they could do it if they'd get them the optics by a certain time. So I got back to Minneapolis the next morning, and there was a telegram from Nichols saying, we're cutting metal. So I called Rooney Taylor and said, we're already cutting metal on this, and we think we can do it. Well, the boys in Wabash with a hell of a job did it. And we got the things there. And of course, that was the invasion of North Africa they wanted this stuff for. Because you see, the original time of the sighting apparatus on all the tanks, both German and ours, was based on the idea of
shooting through hedgerows, thickly populated territories. When you got out in the desert, you were like a ship at sea. So they needed these long, powerful scopes to find out what they were shooting at.
I never realized that. I never realized the difference. Yeah, because
the job that Wabash did for us.
I don't think there's any retired employee that doesn't mention that fact on the scopes and the award that they received for it.
Well,
Had a good company family feeling, I think, all the years.
yeah, well, I tell you, Wabash did a splendid job during the war. I don't know what the employment went up to on it. There must have gone up 700 or 800 anyhow.
Did it well that it hit that high during the war?
in Wabash? Yes, it did. In fact, we reached a peak actually in the 50s again with the Korean War effort. Probably about 11 or 1200 on the payroll. Yeah.
You know, when we bought Micro Switch,
What around
the early
50?
50s,
Yeah.
there was a fellow named Gilmore running Micro Switch. And the first thing he did with me was to get me in his office and say, now, we're coming from a little small town, and we can't make this thing grow beyond 400 people, we'll say. We'll run out of labor. So I want to go start a couple of operations in subsidiary towns around here. One was over in Iowa and one was somewhere else in Illinois. And I said, Gil, I think you're nuts. You're a bigger town than Wabash was by far. And we got up to 1,200 people or whatever it was in Wabash. And you're saying you can't get over 300 people here. Well, anyhow, I couldn't argue him out of it. We knew we didn't want to get at cross purposes, so we let them start these two companies. They've got 3,000 people in Wabash, damn them. Freeport,
yeah.
Yes, I do. If you've got some fair work, labor will come to you.
That's right. They'll find you.
We've got one fellow here I ran into up at my fishing place up on the St. Croix. He and his wife were running the old clubhouse, speaking quarters we had up there. He works up our Columbia plant here, Columbia Ice plant in Minneapolis. It's only a 90-mile drive each way every day.
And he pulls it every day.
Yeah.
Did Mr. Honeywell was quite a fisherman, wasn't he?
Well, he liked to fish down south.
Yeah.
We don't pick up. You know, he had a fishing boat and the Olivet down there, the houseboat.
Were your homes close to each other in Florida?
Well, he was Miami, and I was Palm Beach. And my father and I used to drive down to Fort Lauderdale. And Mark would come up with Miami Beach, and we'd meet on the porch of this little country hotel in Lauderdale. That was a little small town in those days. So it was easier for each of us to get halfway than it would be to go all the way. And then Mark and Charlie Kettering, Fisher, and all these big shots from Detroit were so proud of what they were doing at Miami Beach. Every time I'd get down in the spring and in the winter, Mark would tell me how many new hotels had gone up on the beach and so on. So I said, Mark, you're just crazy. You're going to drive yourself right out of this place. And of course, that's just what happened.
In fact, it's interesting today. We have a sales office that we use a manufacturer sales rep organization in Fort Lauderdale, and the people have now moved. The population's moved up to Fort Lauderdale so heavily they've moved on up to Fort Pierce. Just moving up the coast, trying to get away from it.
We've fought a losing fight, but of course wasn't better than anybody else on the coast of Palm Beach.
Yes.
We've got very strict building laws. Can't build a building over 5 stories high, and that's in only a few places.
And I think that's her help
Well,
to
I remember
preserve
one
it.
thing about Mark. I never saw him so thrilled as he was during the war. When some of these flyers would come through, somewhere hear the name about Honeywell, come out and see him and tell him that you see one automatic pilot when the manual controls have gone out, brought them home. That thrilled Mark to death.
Yes, their war activities were very substantial then.
I don't think anyone ever anticipated the tremendous impact that the transistor that would make on the business. Never would envision something of that nature.
Is Martha Wall still alive?
Yes, she's living, she goes to Arizona quite a bit, and we're scheduling an interview. George will be talking to her soon, and she's already given some information that helped in writing of this other book on Mark Honeywell, but we're looking forward to talking to her.
She was closer to Mark Honeywell than almost anybody else.
I think so, for years and years.
She was his confidential secretary.
She's just now recovering, I think, from a broken arm that she sustained in an automobile accident. Her brother was driving, and to get in.
She was a wonderful gal.
Yes, she
Very
was.
fond of her.
Very good.
So give her my best.
I will do that. Anything else, Will? Did you show?
I've got all the time. I've saved this morning for you.
Good.
So
Well,
good.
good. Well, one of the
On my account.
now, of all these, I found one in here that was quite interesting. I thought maybe if Miss Nelson, at some time in her leisure, could run a copy. One of the pages there describes the Wabash plant quite well at that time. I thought that would be interesting to have in our history.
Got it, so I'll know what to do.
Yeah. It tells the size of the plant. I thought was quite good. Let's see, 56. Let's see, I believe it's on there.
Oh, yes.
Let's see, on this next page here. Let's think. Let's see. Well, this is at one time. This was one of the thoughts for the possibility of consolidating into one plant in Minneapolis. And in this, you described the Wabash plant. Yeah, quite well. Yeah, it is. Yeah, here it is. There, where it described Wabash plant, occupied total floor space, approximately 59,000 square feet, and so like that. Well, I thought that was it.
What this is all about. Wabash Motors.
Right there, steam motor there. And that lists Miss Walrod there, and this is Don Rodeball and some of the people that were active. Nick Olson.
Budget went to
New York, I believe.
New York.
Yes, right.
Then he went from there down to Brown in Philadelphia and died down there suddenly. Budget. Don wrote about Miss Walrod are the only names that. What the hell is this thing? Well, Hampton, I must have written it.
Yeah, right. But it describes Wabash so well, I thought if that would be possible, it would be interesting.
Well, of course, I took a copy of that. If you hand it over to me,
Good.
I think you send that over and have it.
Oh, yeah.
I got this after the first minute book there.
What's the sophomore?
Was your father much of a string saver and so forth, Mr. Sweatt? Your father, did he go for stating the early records and things of that nature?
These are all early minute books.
Right.
To keep those.
Right.
Were you ever acquainted with any of the people in the Ford family there in Wabash?
I knew one Ford.
Probably Wilbur?
Wilbur,
yes, right. He's still quite active there. He's not active too much in the management of the company. He comes in, maybe we'll time in the office every day, but
He was active with Mr. Honeywell in the foundation.
setting up the community center.
Rather interesting. Final sheet of Honeywell, the Honeywell Heating Specialty, in September 27th.
Saw that.
You saw it?
$2,127,000, was it?
No, this is $910,000.
Well, I must have been looking at the corporate balance sheet 27 with $2 million and something.
That must have been the both of us.
Yeah.
Oh, as I remember it, we were about 5 times bigger than Honeywell, but I'm not sure of those figures.
I can recall this Wilbur Ford that we were talking about a minute ago made the comment, he said one time back in the 30s they were quite excited when they reached $1 million in sales that year, and Mark made the comment, well, in Honeywell we had reached $10 million in sales in Minneapolis-Honeywell at that time.
Here's the balance sheet of the combined companies.
Looking at one in here. Here's Honeywell Heating Specialties, balance sheet September 30th, 27, 910,000. That's the same one you're reading.
That would have been the Wabash Ford.
Honeywell.
Yes.
Honeywell combined company. We had quick assets of $3,000,008. We have combined assets, $3,000,008, liabilities, liabilities of $300,000. About $3.5 million.
Yeah, that's very good. One of the questions I had during this early period in the teens up into the 20s at that time, of course, you started developing oil burner controls.
Watch this one.
Just looking at that one. Piece that you left in there for something.
That's the initial
Now, which is that book now?
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah, this is the one. We thought this had some of a better idea of the early history of the plant. This was a report, and we thought possibly if we could have a copy that's not, we wouldn't need it today, but sometime if you could send us sort of just up
up to the elevator, not
Can you
even.
take that over and have it Xerox?
Well, yes, we can do that.
I mean, it's an awful lot of copying to do.
Oh, yes, I'll do that, fine.
Don't worry, it's just yours. I'm just trying to save you
Yeah,
some more.
right.
And then I guess that's all we need of these.
Right. I think that one would be the most significant because it describes the plant quite well at the time and the people that were there in the plant, and this will help us a little bit in talking to some. One of the other reasons why I have done this, again, I'm a young man, and this has helped me to appreciate some of the early days of the plant, and in getting along and working with the people there, I have a better
been
picture.
out there with them.
I've been 11 years now, 11 years.
That's a long time.
Right. And I've been in this job now for the past year and a half.
What happened to Moseworth, you know?
He died in St. Petersburg. He moved to St. Petersburg with the Aero Division in 1962. And that was at the...
He retired?
Yeah, he retired and then subsequently died.
Huh?
He died about 3 or 4 years ago.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Son Roby's died.
Yes, and this Doc Leland, I don't know if you recall Doc Leland.
Yeah, I
was a
remember
personal-
Doc.
And George has recently interviewed Doc Leland. And I think, well, you might have known Mrs. Launder then. Mark Launder, Ray Launder. Ray.
Didn't ring a bell, but I must have.
Yeah, Ray was Mark Honeywell's stepbrother, and he had been plant engineer, some engineering function.
I never knew much about Mark's history and family history.
Of course, rather interesting family history. In fact, I guess, of course, Mark was really a plumber, and one of the things that we found, we were able to locate this catalog that Mark had back in 1912, and that was the early part of the company. That was his sales catalog on some of his products that he had. And
This was, I don't think he even gone into the...
Energy control, yeah. He had this steam generator, this mercury pipe.
Yeah, I remember it.
Yeah, that was one of his basic techniques, but
here's the market.
I was impressed by the amount of description that it gives about the products versus today's catalogs. Today's catalogs don't describe the technique of installing and the product as much as they did at that time. And that's
Now, I remember it very well. There used to be a magazine called Country Life. We used to advertise in it because it got circulation out in the suburbs. And they wrote an article telling how rotten thermostats were. It was written it, but they were no good at all. It made me mad. I wrote back, if that's the editorial opinion of the heat regulator, I guess we'd better quit advertising. Well, they had quite a squabble about it. Finally, I sent somebody out to this fellow's house, and he put the thermostat in the back of a hall room closet with no circulation, nothing in it.
No wonder
I wondered why it didn't work.
Yeah. Oh, God.
You put great stock in the early days on magazine advertising, didn't you? You put great stock in your magazine advertising in the early
Yeah,
days.
well, you know, we had an ad, I suppose it was old, and the first issue of the Saturday Post was ever published.
All right.
So it goes back a long way.
And you would get your responses and then forward them to the field office as
Well,
needed.
we didn't have many field offices. We find it happened forwarded to a dealer. Yeah, Richmond, Virginia, wherever it was. But then we started back in the teens. My brother really developed this more of our own retail offices. Just pendant damper flappers, as we derisively call it now. Milwaukee, Chicago, New York. And that was the very beginning of our branch office system all over the country.
Do you recall Lloyd Hamilton?
Who?
Lloyd Hamilton used to be the Apparatus Controls Division.
Anyway,
Yeah, I think Lloyd was the first one to open the Atlanta branch. I think he opened it back in the 30s and sold industrial products for a number of years, and then he, along with Ray West, helped in the formation of the Apparatus Controls Division.
They've consolidated that division, which I'm sorry to see. You know, somebody comes in and does the job you're doing now. They may do it a hell of a lot better than you, but they do a few things you don't think you ought to do.
Yes, that's well stated. Excellent. Very well stated. Yeah, I'm sure that's difficult. In fact, I don't know if you recall Bob Ensler at the microswitch operation.
Oh, yeah,
Bob
he just retired.
Yes, and I was over there for his retirement luncheon, and Bob had a
I
little.
didn't get over there, but I wrote him a letter on the retirement.
And Bob had a little problem with high blood pressure, and so consequently he's been out of an active role in the management of the company for probably the past year. And this is like you say, it bothers him. He says they aren't, the place doesn't look as clean as it used to, and they aren't taking it.
He's got high blood pressure. There's no reason on earth they can't settle him down on some medication.
Yes.
That'll hold it wherever you want it. Mine was way high. And I take this, I used to take what they call purposol, once a day. Now I'm on something else, on the diuretic. And I was in just last week to have it checked again. That was 130 over 83.
That's very good. That's great. That's very, very. Very important.
Who do you play bridge with? Old Honeywell employees or?
No, I play bridge over across the street at the club with, there's a crowd that use the card room.
Not business associates and when you're active about business.
Have you ever been active in a service club like Rotary or Kiwanis or anything like that?
I wanted, I think once for 2 meetings, and then they threw me out.
George and I are both active in Rotary, and both of us have been presidents of the
My son-in-law is active in Rotary here.
Is he right here in Minneapolis?
Fine organization. What do you think of some of our trends in the company today from the standpoint of getting heavier in the computer segment of the business? And the strong business we have in Europe today.
Well, I'm all in favor of doing anything that increases the business.
Good.
At a profit.
We've had a little problem with this Harkey-Burke bill. I don't know if you followed it, but of course they're trying to limit us somewhat in the trade policies as far as foreign profits are concerned, and that's been
one of our problems that we've gotten in trouble on the last 2 years. Is that everybody that's in the sales department is afraid to price anything at a fair profit. And that's particularly true in Europe.
Yes, I think that there's been an attitude for years that Honeywell, and used to be a rule of thumb, and I'm sure you've heard it many times, that we were never the lowest price. We always
held a little below the competitors.
Right, that was all part of it.
Which was better than letting them cut the prices and have to follow.
Yes. And I think all of that has happened. My own division, the commercial division, has had some problems in that respect in the past couple of years.
Yeah, but you call it the commercial division. And one thing in your favor that residential controls don't have, and that is you have no problems with antitrust. Or these new control phases. because every job, actually the commercial division figures out is a different job.
Yes, right. It's a little difficult to compare to a previous.
So you can more or less set your own prices there. Well, fear free of government interference, your only thing is a competitive situation.
Okay. I think that's very true.
Well, you know, John, I was out in Japan a few years ago. And the Japanese company was doing a hell of a lot of business, but they weren't making any money at it. And Charlie Beach was out there in those days, the Honeywell man from the East. I got a hold of Charlie and I said, I don't give a damn what you do, how you do it. But if you can sell your competitors on the idea that you're going to meet their prices, but if they put them up, you pull yours up, you can make all the difference in the world. You haven't got all that trust and all this stuff to bother about. Well, they did it now, very much more profitable now.
Would you wonder whether a company the size of Honeywell could really be put together now under the existing government regulations and so forth?
I doubt it. Of course, we couldn't have done the primary thing, put the two Honeywell and Minneapolis together. We probably could have put Brown Instrument in, because that was a field that we weren't in. And there's plenty of reasons why we wanted to get into that field. This goes back to Paul Shivers. Paul developed motorized valves suitable for commercial, industrial installation. But the industry, Brown, Foxborough, Bristol, and all the rest of them, were fundamentally indicating people and not control people. And we found to sell a couple of valves, we had to rebuild a whole Foxborough instrument or something in order to get some controls in it. Well, that didn't suit us at all because we were the small end of the horn with a valve or two and selling our competitors $500 stuff. Brown was the most progressive company along the lines of controls. And we finally made a deal where we took them over, and they took us over where you want to put it.
That's been very successful, and I think that added quite a bit to Honeywell over the years to do that.
I notice your Navy ship plates are great love of the sea.
I got those and gave them. First time I was in London, and they're supposed to be quite old and quite rare in those days. I brought them home from my father's office, and they're supposed to be exceptionally good prints.
Do you have a great love for the sea, or was it the...
No, I just have to.
The print itself?
No. That one back of you there is the Panama Canal.
Oh, yeah.
And that is an original Joseph Fennell charcoal sketch. And etching it, the original charcoal sketch. I had quite a collection of etchings, but I gave them all at the Art Institute here a few years ago.
I noticed a rather attractive one right behind you there.
Yeah. Well, I like that because it was the ship at Gibraltar.
I thought that's what the setting was.
I was always very fond of going to Europe through the Mediterranean rather than the North Atlantic.
The airplane destroyed many of your pleasures then, I see, the ship and so forth.
And I still love ships.
There's a very good book out now, and this man has put down the reminiscences and stories of crossing the Atlantic on ships, on the great ships, and it's called The Only Way to Cross. And
I think I saw a copy of that somewhere.
and I read it, and it's
Well, a lot of the boats, ships he was talking about were ones that I've been on.
he talked about the Queens, and he talked about the German ships, and of course the French ships, which he considered these ships, any of the
I
French
don't think
ships.
I ever crossed on a German ship.
Well, I think at the Honeywell Center, one of the couch upstairs, I think, came from the stateroom that Mr. Honeywell occupied on the Queen Mary. He enjoyed the couch so much in there, he bought it and had it sent back to Wabash. He's there in the Honeywell Center.
But he considered the French ships as the way to cross the Atlantic.
French?
Yes.
I like the Queens.
Yeah.
All my pet ships were the Italian ships.
Really? That's where you gain all the weight then, eating all the pasta.
I don't eat so much. Miss Sweatt said, I don't see what you like about a ship. All we do is sit in the bar anyhow.
He's always, that was my comment, I've always been so impressed. You've always been very physically fit. I think that's quite an attribute. That's an important thing. I think I've recognized to have a good mind, I think you also have to be physically well, and to be able to be a good manager, you have to do that too.
How long have you had an office up here, Mr. Sweatt?
Well, this office is new within less than a year. We used to be up on the 13th floor. Well, first we were over in building same block. This is it. That's where Bill Huff originally had the office. And then they moved us out of there to put us in up on the